Let's call to order City Council Special Budget Work Session, Tuesday, April 5th, 2022. We'll begin with roll call.
Cock. Councilmember Babcock.
Present.
Councilmember Burkover.
Excitedly here.
Councilmember Watson.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Gregg.
Here.
Mayor Bacon.
Present. I'll look for a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Councilperson Brookover, second by Councilperson Babcock. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Look for communication from council. Councilperson Brookover,
No, thank you, Mayor.
Councilperson Babcock,
No, thank you.
Councilperson Watson,
Pass.
Mayor Pro Tem Gregg.
Also pass, thank you.
I'll just say quickly, thank you all for being here today. I know when there's money moving around, everyone's present, so this is the best audience we've had. But sincerely to the public, this is one of our most important duties as a council. We take it very seriously. We'll be in budgetary sessions for the next 5 weeks, moving forward to ratify a budget, and we'll give it all the due diligence and listening to possible. We'll look forward to correspondence and input from the public on the budget. As I said before, it's just really one of our most solemn duties. So that's it. Moving on to item 4.1, overview, financial year 2023, preliminary budget and fee schedule with emphasis on general fund and income tax fund.
I'll go ahead and get started. Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Council. So we are, go ahead and start the first slide. So we are pleased to present the City Council with our fiscal year 23 proposed budget, and obviously to present to the community as well. You know, my role at this point as city manager is to propose a budget. I don't do that alone. I do that. It's the work of many people. We'll talk about that in a minute. But obviously at this point, for the next, as the mayor said, 5 council work sessions, this becomes council's process leading to an approved budget on May 24th. The 5 scheduled work sessions, we're going to actually show you that schedule, are really just here to provide the information that you need to make the best decisions possible. You can see we have a room full of folks here with all the expertise, all the information, hopefully to provide you all the answers that you would require in filling that process. So we appreciate all of them being here as well. And as you look at the schedule, 5 weeks may sound like a lot of time, but we have a lot of ground to cover. So as you look at the schedule, Jill will be pulling that up shortly. Feel free to let us know as soon as possible if there are other areas you want us to focus on, other areas of emphasis, so that we can certainly work that into the process to make sure that we answer all of your questions as we get to May 24th. So the fiscal year 2023 budget represents $126.38 million in all funds. Obviously, there's many funds in the city, and $42.5 million in the general fund. We tend to focus most of our efforts on the general fund because it's the area, first of all, it's our largest fund, but it's also the area where the city and city council has the most discretion to provide a full range of services. So that's the reason we focus a lot on the general fund. So one thing I'd mention about this is this budget continues our progress to greater financial sustainability and also continuing to provide a service level that our residents expect. And I think that's really important that we're focusing on both of those. Obviously, we could err on the side of financial sustainability and do less, but then our residents would suffer in terms of the service levels provided. So we have to strike that balance. Our goal each year is to move the city towards a stronger financial position and leave the city in a better position a year from now, not in a worse financial position. So that's certainly always our goal. And our goal is making long-term financial decisions, again, not thinking of short-term considerations necessarily. Next slide. So this document I mentioned represents the work of a lot of staff. While it's my recommendation, obviously I'm ably assisted by an extremely competent and capable finance staff under Jill Felposh's leadership, Audrey Kincaid, Justin Geiger, ably assisting. They do the actual technical work of putting the budget together. It's a very impressive document, and they do a lot of work to do that. But it's also the effort of all of our directors, the people you see in the audience. They've got to be able to figure out how to provide a service level that meets the needs of their operation while also considering costs and considering what we can afford. So as we prepared this budget document, council may remember that we came to council several weeks ago with a financial forecast, and that showed about $800,000 use of fund balance. Then the department directors go back and do their work, and when they actually put pen to paper, we compile that into a budget document, and the number unsurprisingly got to about $2 million use of fund balance. Now, that is not extravagance by any extent. That is people believing what they think they needed to do to provide the right level of service. So we then obviously cannot propose a budget to you that has a $2 million use of fund balance because that's not sustainable. That's not a part of a plan. That's not sustainable for us. So we had to do our work with the directors, work with finance to get that number to a number where we thought it was sustainable. The number we're proposing is a little under $500,000, $500,000 use of fund balance. And that is something where we believe through careful management over the year, we can recoup much of that and essentially have little or no use of fund balance through careful management. And what that means is over the year, potentially there could be slightly more revenue in some areas. There could be new sources of revenue. We would put that towards this, of course. And of course, there's opportunities to save money. Positions become vacant, you hold it. Naturally, positions become vacant, or you find other ways to control costs and limit that. So when we come to you with a $500,000 use of fund balance, our goal would be to have little or no use of fund balance by the end of the year. And we believe that that is doable with careful management. And then I'd also mention that, furthering our financial sustainability, I think there's these two big indicators that I like to think of, and I think and that making progress on them are a good yardstick for us. And one is this budget continues our $5 million supplemental pension contribution. So this is over and above the regular contribution, the plus $5 million, the majority coming from income tax, the rest coming from the general fund. And then, of course, doing all this while maintaining an adequate or strong reserves, which, again, we believe this does as well. So, again, all of this has to happen in a situation where you're continuing to provide the services that your residents expect and deserve while balancing that with the need to increase or create a more financially sustainable organization, again, which we think this budget does. So with that, we're going to jump right into Jill's presentation, and then we're going to go into more detail with our department directors for the larger departments going into their specific operations. And of course, council can ask any questions you want. If we don't have answers, we'll write them all down. And then when we provide answers, whether it's now or in the coming days, if you have any answers, send them on to my office. We'll compile those questions, get them to finance, get you written answers. And then at the end of the week, we share the answers with all of council. So even if someone asks a question, we want everyone to have the benefit of those questions and answers. So we share written responses to all of council. I think we do that on Friday generally, or do we do it?
As part of the
Next budget work session. So we will have that information for you by the part of the next budget work session. With that, I will turn it over to Jill to begin her presentation.
Great, thank you. So I'm going to do a quick overview of the document. I'm going to talk real globally about everything that's impacting, citywide. I'm going to then highlight general fund revenues and expenditures. I'll talk a little bit about income tax, and I'll highlight a couple other funds that we don't necessarily have on the schedule to have a further discussion on. And then we can talk more about what you would like to see if there's other conversations you would like to have. And then we'll turn it over to department heads, as George had mentioned. So the document overview, the very front section is the executive summary. You're going to find a lot of good information in here. We have the strategic action plan, so priority-based budgeting, very much related to strategic priorities. It also has performance measures in there, some different metrics. The budget timetables in there, so that's a good page to note. There's a bunch of tables and graphs, which if you like tables and graphs, that's a good place to look. The personnel summary for the whole city. Then the budget in brief. This is kind of where I'm going to focus my time tonight. So if you read the budget in brief, you're going to hear a lot of the same things tonight. And then acknowledgements. So as George mentioned, this is not a Jill-only document. This is very much a citywide department and a big part of the finance department putting time and effort into this.
Director Feldman.
Yes.
Can you bring your mic up a little bit?
Sure.
Or we'll give you a little more sound if it's not me here.
The next section is the financial section. So this is the actual budget recommendation. You're going to see fiscal year 21 actuals. You're going to see fiscal year 22 amended budget, so the budget we're currently working under. And you're going to see what we're proposing as the fiscal year 23 budget. We'll also talk about year-end estimates. So if you hear us talk about fiscal year 22 estimates or year-end results, that's us estimating how we're going to end this year. And then the appendix has the fee schedule, so another important piece of what you pass. So you are passing not only the budget, but also the fee schedule. So there's the first appendix, Appendix A, is the fee schedule. So that's probably something that you should look at, and if you have any concerns, we can talk about that during the different conversations with departments. Then there's also the capital improvement plan, an excerpt from that, and then the debt service schedules. Next slide. So as you can imagine, COVID-19, the pandemic, still impacts these years. So fiscal year 21, significant impact. We had different shutdowns, activities were closed, buildings were closed. So you'll see a lot of conversation in here about pre-pandemic, post-pandemic, because of the pandemic, because of COVID-19. I look forward to the day when we don't have to talk about that anymore. But fiscal year 21 was probably the most impacted fiscal year. We are seeing fiscal year 22 really rebound a lot quicker than we anticipated, so that's positive. And then fiscal year 23 really gets us back to what we're going to say is more of a normal year. So you will see some large variances, and a lot of it is the pandemic. And then income tax is probably the biggest area that might continue to be impacted. With remote work, we are seeing significant increases in refunds. Obviously, we're still only 1 year into that from a tax year perspective. We're working on the second year, so we're still not sure what the overall impact has been. There is an intentional focus on DEI in this budget. You'll see lots of goals, metrics, conversations within the document. You'll see some changes in operations, so you should see that throughout the document. You'll see some ARPA spending in here, so whether you've already allocated some of these costs, or some of that in the light green box that we've been talking about. So some of those capital improvements are in this budget as well. The other thing that's happening right now, inflation and supply chain issues. So we did our best to try to accommodate that, project for that. I think that's a big risk for us as we start doing development, just start doing construction. I think we may see larger numbers than we anticipated, which means we'll just kind of have to come back and think about what can we do with the money we have, or what kind of changes do we make to the projects to be able to afford those. Of course, we have a cost of living adjustment in here, or a COLA. We're using 3%. We do have 7 bargaining groups that are open as of July 1, so that is obviously subject to negotiation. For OPEB is other post-employment benefits. This is retiree health care. We are putting $100,000 into the trust. That is to comply with Public Act 202. So we have to put enough in there for the normal cost of any employee who will receive retiree health care if they were hired after June 30, 2018. The $100,000 we've been putting in since PA 202 went into effect, and it has more than covered, so we're actually putting more in than we are required to. And then, of course, the supplemental pension payment of $5 million, and there's 1.1 coming from the general fund this year, or proposed for fiscal year 23. Next slide. So this next slide is just that table that I think we have shared before. It shows by fiscal year. It also is color-coded by calendar year because our valuations are determined by the calendar year. But really the point here is we have put almost $25 million into the pension plan as supplemental. And I think we are hopefully seeing some progress there. Every projection we've been getting from MERS is showing that our required contributions are starting to level out. Previously, we had been seeing some significant projected increases. Now, of course, this assumes that the assumptions don't change, and MERS is already outlining additional changes to the investment rate of return. So we will see how that plays out. We will get our next evaluation sometime in June. So we'll get that for as of December 31st of 2021, and then we'll have a more clear picture of what that assumption change means and what kind of impact that has on our required contributions. But that wouldn't impact fiscal year 23. That's always another year out. So It wouldn't change this budget. Next slide. Things that are not included in the budget. So we have approximately $12.1 million of ARPA money. If you include what we have in this budget, we would still have another $6.3 million to allocate for whatever projects. And I think we're talking about that again tonight at the regular meeting. We will receive the second payment of $6.1 million in May of '22. So in May, we will have the full $12 million in our bank account and ready to spend. We must obligate all of that money no later than December 31st, 2024, and we must actually pay out all of that money by December 31st, 2026. If we have any funds left at December 31st, 2026, we would have to give that back to the federal government. This also does not include potential grants that are out there, right? The state has a lot of ARPA money that can be allocated. We've applied for some grants related to public safety hiring and training. There's some economic development grants that we're looking into. There's also, the potential conversation out there at the state level to assist in underfunded pension plans. So anybody that's under 60% funded could potentially get some grant money from the state of Michigan. It would be using I'm not sure if it's CARES or ARPA, I forget now. But that's a potential not included in here. And even if it did happen, it wouldn't impact our fiscal year '23. It would most likely impact our fiscal year '25, because any contributions that happen in calendar year '22 impacts our fiscal year '25. Also not included is the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. So this is all about infrastructure. The federal dollars would be pushed through to the state. And there is some potential there, but at this point, we're not sure if there's anything that we'll be eligible for. This also does not include the potential sale of the vacant property on West Road. And this also does not include the Chesterfield rental conversion program. So just a reminder, we have $300,000 sitting in the general fund balance that can only be used for the Chesterfield rental conversion program. Next slide, please. Another part of what you approve is the tax rate. So that's why it's, the preliminary budget, tax rate, and fee schedule is what you're approving. So this kind of lays out the last 10 years of millage rates. You can see in fiscal year '20, that's when we implemented the income tax. So we had a full 5 mil reduction in operating. And we have held millage rates flat since then. So the last 4 years would be at the exact same rate. This assumes there's no Headley rollback. We won't know that until early May. At this point, we don't anticipate one. If we did have a Headley rollback, it would only impact the library because we have room in our millage rates for operating and for solid waste. The other thing to point out is the library mill. There's 2 mills that are levied. One is levied by City Council. The other is approved by the voters. Fiscal year '23 is the final year of the voter-approved millage. So that will be on the ballot, I believe, in the fall. And then the DDA has a millage of 1.7007. Obviously, that only impacts those in the downtown district. Next slide. General fund highlights. So fiscal year '23 budget, $42.5 million. We're using about $500,000 of fund balance. That's an increase of $2.6 million over the '22 budget. And that really has to do with returning to normal, wage increases, position changes, pension cost increases, and then ARPA. In fiscal year '21, so back a couple years now, we actually replenished our fund balance by $2.5 million. So this is the year where we weren't sure what was going to happen. We cut a lot of things, we stopped a lot of things, we held every position vacant, we furloughed, we did a lot of things in response to the pandemic. We were able to secure $1.8 million of grants, which significantly helped the city, and really is the biggest result of why we were able to replenish some of our fund balance. We also had $800,000 from the sale of Lot 4. That left our unassigned fund balance at 15.7%. So remember, unassigned is money that's not spoken for, or not already restricted or committed in some other manner. And that is that's unassigned fund balance is what we like to look at. That's what the council's policy is 8 to 15% unassigned fund balance. So we were at 15.7% at the end of 21. In 22, we expect to use around $179,000. It's a little misleading because we would like to recommend moving the $800,000 of Lot 4 sales proceeds into a capital improvement fund. We would set that aside for future facility improvements when we would need that money. So instead of sitting in the general fund, it's kind of a little bit misleading as a way for us to set aside money for future facility improvements. We thought that would just be a good use of that money. So really, if you looked at that, the operations would actually result in an increase of about $600,000. So again, we've been able to manage carefully, maximize our revenues. Revenues came in better than we anticipated. Like I said, returning to normal, really returned a lot quicker than we thought. But we also have still been managing our expenditures very carefully. So if we use $179,000, that puts us at about 19% of unassigned fund balance. And then moving into 23, that projects total fund balance at $8.3 million, which is equal to 19.4. But if you back out some of the committed amounts, it gets us down to 17.4%. So we are exceeding that 8 to 15%. Don't think that's a bad thing. I think 8 to 15, it's a number that has been in there for a long time. There's some communities that have 30% fund balance. So we are probably on the lower end. Really, that's only like 2 months of expenditures. So if you put it into that context, it doesn't really seem like much money. Next slide, please. So general fund revenues, we kind of talked about this during the forecast. Not going to spend a lot of time here. You can see in 21, there's that blip. A lot of it's that intergovernmental revenue, which is those grants. You can see in 22, we dropped back down to right around the $40 million mark. And then fiscal year 23 is going back up to $42.5 million. I'll touch a little bit on some of the main changes on these next slides. Next slide. So property taxes, largest single source of revenue at almost $14.9 million. We are seeing a significant increase this year, over $700,000 increase, which is nearly 5%. So there's a couple factors. We have a CPI amount of 3.3%. And then we also have new construction, and we have on-cappings that are adding to that growth. Under intergovernmental revenue, $10.9 million. That's an increase of about $900,000. And that's allocating $690,000 of ARPA. So really that growth is really an assumption that we're going to use some of these ARPA dollars.
Jill, can I ask a question?
Yeah.
The uncappings, that's because property is transferred to a new owner, right?
Correct.
That's about the only circumstance that would happen.
Correct.
There's nothing else that would trigger
Not-
that.
Not that I know of.
Okay, so that's kind of a side effect of our extremely hot housing market. Awesome, thank you.
Yeah, so instead of staying at that taxable value limited to the CPI, it jumps up to the assessed value.
Right.
I have a quick question too.
Yep.
On the color graph, I'm having trouble finding the marijuana tax color.
Because it's very little in comparison. So you can see a teeny tiny little line in there, but it's really almost not noticeable. So in fiscal year 2022, we budgeted $56,000. In fiscal year 23, we budgeted $85,000. And this was obviously before we found out what our allocation was this year. So
Which is
we were,
more, right?
Yes.
To clarify, that teeny little line is between the property taxes and the intergovernmental?
Yes,
So
it is.
it almost looks like an overlap of
Yes.
ink colors, but that is actually the line that we're
That,
talking about. Okay.
yes, you can see it if you look really, really closely. Yes, but it's between the first two.
Perfect, thank you.
Yep. Okay, so with the ARPA money, just to highlight the 690, 200 of it is for the basement backup prevention program. So remember, you guys allocated 500,000. We're expecting around $200,000, and of course, that's an estimate. To date, we have spent about $56,000. So depending on where we end the year, there will most likely be more than $200,000 available if needed. It's just, that's our estimate. $240,000 for drain and retention pond improvements, and $250,000 for sidewalk improvements. Next slide. Charges for services, $2.9 million. The 22 budget, this was impacted significantly by COVID-19. So we had reduced the 22 budget to $2.4 million. We have year-end estimates of closer to $2.7 million. So again, improving better than we expected. And the biggest key there is ambulance service charges. So we expected that to be about $900,000, and it's actually coming in probably closer to 1.2 or 1.3 million, which is about a normal year for the city. And then the blip from the year-end estimate of 2.7 to the budget of 2.9 is really $250,000 of charges for sidewalk improvements. So we share that cost with homeowners. So that's what that anticipated amount is. And then we have the transfer from the income tax. That is part of other financing sources if you're trying to look at a table. In fiscal year 22, we had 7.1 million budgeted. We expect the year end to be closer to 7.2 million. Did I say that right? 7.1 is budgeted, 7.2 is year end estimate. And then our 23 budget is projected at 7.5, with 6.2 of that coming from lost property taxes, and then 1.3 for that 20% public safety. Yes.
Just to clarify, that income tax amount that is after we have refunded the property tax offset? Okay, so that's our
So the
net.
the 6.2 is the property tax,
Okay, perfect.
making us whole for the
Got it.
reduced property taxes.
I could have just read one more line.
That's
I
okay.
haven't seen that. Thank you.
And the 1.3 is the public safety piece.
I guess I was momentarily concerned that there was a minus there, and then it was, anyway, got it. Thank you.
That would be bad. Next slide. I'm not going to go through all of this. I was just trying to summarize real quickly all of the personnel changes in the general fund. This is in the personnel summary. You can reference here if you want. My point is lots of employee changes. Some have actually happened. It just wasn't really part of the 22 budget, so it's really just the first time we're adding it into the budget process. You can see, a lot of departments are being impacted here. Net, it's 2 positions difference, but it's going up 7 full-time positions, down 5 part-time positions. A lot of that's just reclassing people from part-time to full-time. And then we're up 41 contingent hours, so basically flat as far as contingent employees. Next slide. General fund expenditure highlights. So personnel services, largest part of our budget, 31.7 million. So about 70% of our budget is spent on people. Fiscal year 22 budget's 30.3. We think we're going to end the year closer to 29.7. So this is due to quite a few positions that are vacant. And we have seen some overtime costs going up. So as we've had positions that are vacant, specifically in the police department, that has required additional overtime to provide the right level of service. It also includes the $1.55 million in supplemental pension payments as we budgeted. Fiscal year 23 is increasing $1.4 million, which is 4.7%. Remember, 3% COLA. Also includes step increases for those who are eligible. It also includes retirements that we are expecting, and the personnel changes that we talked about. We also are seeing an increase in our MERS defined benefit costs of $895,000, and that is offset by a reduction of $450 as far as the supplemental. So as the income tax grows, we're able to relieve that pressure from the general fund to maintain that $5 million supplemental pension payment. For operating cost, we're expecting $11.5 million. That's an increase of almost $1 million. $200,000 of that is the basement backup prevention program. We also have $240,000 for the drain and retention pond improvements. And then the other increases are in drain assessments, the legal services, and our custodial services. Next slide. Capital outlay, $688,900. This is a pretty large amount for us in the general fund. We normally don't see this much, but it really has to do with the sidewalk programs that we anticipate doing. Some of it funded with CDBG, others funded with ARPA. It also includes some playground equipment replacement and some improvements to our police interview rooms. Transfers out, $2.6 million. Parks and Rec makes up the most of that, almost $2.3 million. Good thing to note here, this is returning to an inflationary increase. So we, in the past, pre-COVID, we would just give an inflationary increase to these transfers. In fiscal year 21, we needed to make a significant increase to keep them out of a deficit. And then in fiscal year 22, we added another like 75,000, I believe. So this is kind of returning them back to what it would have been if we had just done inflationary increases. Seniors are at 150,000. The CIP fund gets around 81,000, and that's to subsidize the Avondale Square debt. Debt service is 61,000. That was for some facility improvements that were made. The Public Art Fund, 22,615, with 17,500 of that for the Art Commission. So they do some different grants. So that's the amount of money they have to allocate out in grant form. The percent of art would then be the other 5,000. And then the Art Festival at 10,000. Next slide. Any questions on the general fund? I'm happy to go in more detail, but I also know other departments will be talking about their stuff, so I want to keep it very high level at this point.
And one question about the sidewalk improvement program. Do we have a anticipated timeline for that program? It's a one-year program, or are we going to see that amount?
What we were proposing in the ARPA budget was $500,000 over 2 years, so 250 and 250. This year we have CDBG money. We haven't allocated I don't have a plan for next year, but that's what we're proposing.
Okay. So this 650 includes the CDBG and the ARPA funding, and then is that both years of ARPA funding or just 1 year of ARPA funding?
It's 1 year, so it's 250 of ARPA.
Okay.
And then 250 of the shared costs with the homeowners. Okay. So that's a complete estimate. It would be determined on the actual sidewalks and the impact and who's responsible for it. Cool. So that might need to change as we actually have our plan in place of what sidewalks are going to be replaced.
We're not really anticipating that 2 years of sidewalk improvements will fix our sidewalk problems. This is part of an ongoing plan, or are we hoping that we can really hit it hard?
I think it's getting good progress where we haven't made as good a progress over the prior years. So I think it's much needed, but it's not going to fix our sidewalk problem.
In the past, we would normally put $50,000 to $100,000 of hazardous sidewalk repairs in a budget, kind of pre-financial challenges, which was a long time ago. And that was more to maintain some of the sidewalks. So I don't think you're ever going to get away from not having sidewalk improvements.
Yeah,
but
no,
this is a significant amount of sidewalk improvements.
Okay.
As far as from a budget perspective.
It's reflecting a considerable amount of delayed maintenance. We don't need to spend $600,000 on sidewalk every single year. We're trying to catch up.
I don't think so. I mean, I'll defer to the
I think we'd have to ask
Public
Nicole
Works
to
person,
give a quick opinion on that.
We're going to be talking about this a lot. I just was kind of curious what that reflected, so no worries.
And Nicole will be talking next week, so she can touch on that next week as well. Any other questions on the general fund?
So I can also just jump into the fact that we're going to have, our plan is to have Chief Johnson come up and do an overview of police, and then time permitting, we'd have Chief Carson come up and do an overview of fire, and then next week we would go into planning, building, and development and public works, which are the biggest operations in the general fund, and then add anything if needed and questions if needed. So that's the plan. So if you have questions about those 4 areas, we can wait till the presentations, or you can ask them now. Either way.
I do have some questions, Ms. Valposh. And again, a fabulous report. I wish I could admit that I'd read the whole thing, but it's very, very helpful, and I will be reading the whole thing. Pursuant to your orders, I have reviewed the executive summary, and I do have a couple questions, just from sort of a global view to clarify. And I think the easiest way to point this out to you is if you start on, I guess it's page 55 or LV. I don't know if I think you have that in front of you. and there's going to be a continuity to these 3 or 4 questions. I just want to make sure I understand it. So in your second paragraph, you're talking about the basement backup prevention program. Excuse me. And then subsequent to that, on the bottom of page 57, your last paragraph, you're talking about operating costs, contract services, and you're talking again about an increase as a result of ARPA-funded projects. And then subsequent to that, on page LX 60, you're talking about enterprise funds, you're talking about the automobile parking system fund, and again, you're mentioning the ARPA funding, and I know we're going to get into that later tonight. But what I'm trying to figure out is, so if I look at this globally, you're talking about these expenditures, but you're including in the projected budget expenditures ARPA money. Is that correct?
Yeah, the revenue would include that ARPA fund.
Okay, but if you go back to the operating costs in the general fund, and that 57, down to page of 57, you're talking about operating costs. Is that the revenue? That's not the revenue side.
That's the expenditure side. So
Okay.
when we have ARPA, you're going to see an inflated revenue under intergovernmental revenue, and you're going to see an inflated operating cost or capital, depending on how that's coded on the expenditure side.
Okay, so as I'm analyzing this as we go through it, I'm going to inartfully use the term net. So the reality is, if I really want to look at what the net taxpayer cost is, I would subtract the ARPA funds from those categories, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And then on the bottom of that same page, 57, you're talking about the ARPA stuff, and then you talk substantial increases in legal prosecution services and custodial services are projected with new contracts, and a renewed focus on employee training comes with additional costs. I assume the legal prosecution services is a result of the contract we just passed in the last couple of weeks.
That's correct.
And then secondly, the custodial services, I assume that's a collective bargaining situation?
No, it's a contract that we actually have
outside
subcontracted custodial.
sourced?
That process is out for bid. We would be coming back to council with a contract to approve in the coming weeks. Their RFP process is under review, and we anticipate there will be an increase in price, but we don't know what that is yet.
Okay, thank you. That's all I have.
So should we skip over to any more questions? Should we jump over to Chief Johnson? Okay. You're up.
I just wanted clarification on the sidewalk improvements, and you all mentioned the CDBG funds, but we haven't approved it yet. We haven't approved their recommendations.
Correct.
And
I just want to jump on that as well. So nothing here has been approved, even the ARPA money, we're talking about that tonight, but we're weaving it into the budget, but that's all council's decision. So the ARPA money as well, CDBG, all part of the process.
thanks. Thank you. And for the police interview room, is it singular or is there more than one police interview room? Okay,
Just one.
Thanks.
That's my mistake.
Real quick from me then. Intergovernmental, that's state to local, the share. Is that the intergovernmental portion
It
right
would
there?
be federal or
The
state.
federal. And then, so that will be not negatively impacted by hold harmless movement kind of thing with the state here. We're going to be made whole for this year regardless of,
In regards to the census change?
yeah, the apportionment.
Yeah, my understanding is the budget includes, or the supplemental included, that we wouldn't be pulled back, I guess, from what we already had. So in theory, they should be pulling that back from us, but they will not do that this year, given the timeline.
And that was for 1 year.
Just this year, just fiscal year '22. So our '23 would be impacted by that census change.
And then secondary, kind of more anecdotally long-term here on the marijuana tax. Kind of before us as a council, or even before the city gets an appetite for this, I definitely want to see us down the road looking to apportion this to the affected areas. If it's a 50-50 split, if it's a percentage, it goes to 54B, it goes to police and fire, it goes to D&I or other affected areas before we even take a bite of marijuana dollars in the future. I
So
think
the way we currently have it is the council policy where the money goes essentially to the court operations. It goes to, I think, $14,000. The first money goes to help people who are, who can't afford drug testing procedures as a part of their process. And then the additional money goes to basically court operations for the treatment courts, which would be the drug treatment courts for personnel and for staffing of those.
Yeah, understood. I'm assuming it's going to balloon over time or grow over time, and then we'll be I don't want to even,
Yeah.
I don't even want us to develop the appetite for it before we've figured out where we want to do with it and kind of how, where those disparate impact areas are while it's still in its infancy, or otherwise it's going to blend right in. That'll be something to talk about down the road here, just so I know when we're bean counting, that's part of it. So we're just blacking that out, and it's already gone at some point. That'd be something I'd like to have before council and talk about on the marijuana dollars. So that was it.
Yeah, I think the marijuana dollars is still very new. So, last year was the first year we received 28,000. So it's 28,000 per facility last year. This year was 56,000 per facility. So I think it'll be hard to project what those dollar amounts are going to be until we get some more history and that kind of levels out. So
Yeah.
Can I ask a question pursuant to that? So our payout per facility is a state aggregated amount that goes back to, so it's not based on the revenue of any individual
correct.
seller of medical or recreational marijuana. It's a aggregated amount from the state, and then it's returned to us by percentage of how many facilities we have operating.
The state, yes,
Okay.
collects all the tax statewide, and then it's allocated by a formula. So every facility
sales
gets
tax,
a percentage.
But it's marijuana sales tax.
Instead of a person or a census count, it's by facility, a licensed facility in your community. So
And
some
we
communities
have-
would get none if they don't have a facility.
Right, or if they've opted out. So we have 5 potential sites.
We have 6 potential sites.
And how many of those have an operating business on them right now?
So we have the 5th one is about to be opened or is in the process of being opened on the Sawyer's Pontiac site. And then the final one would be the former Merritt Road Public Works site that has a site plan.
But no
Mr.
tenant
Fehrenbach,
yet.
and they haven't started construction yet or anything like that.
They're still, they're nearing the building permits.
Okay. So a little bit out, but in process.
So I just, that there is a potential increase, but I don't think we're talking about like a bottomless pit of new revenue, right?
No.
So, yeah.
But so far it's been an exponent. If we're going up, if you're 28, 56, 85, I can look at about 10 years from now where this could be a significant part of the budget if we're depending on it.
Right.
If we don't allocate it, it'll be
Intentionally, yeah.
it'll be worse for whoever's mayor then, trying to claw some of this
You'll
back.
have to start your second.
Nope. But not 10 years. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to move on to income tax, if everybody's okay with that. So I only have 2 quick slides on income tax. As you can imagine, income tax is still kind of difficult. So 2019, first year, 2020, pandemic, extended filing deadlines. I feel like they've thrown everything at us in regards to how are we going to calculate our income tax revenue. So this is kind of a history by fiscal year of how much money came in and how much money was allocated out or spent. So you can see in the first year, fiscal year 20, 13.8 million was our ending revenue number, and we allocated less than 10. So some of that was due to deadlines. We didn't collect all the money before June 30th. So there's lots of factors in that. But then you can see in fiscal year 21, obviously our allocation, our expenditures are greater than our revenue. And that's because I then took all that extra money from fiscal year 20 and allocated it during fiscal year 21. And then you can see our estimate in 22, 12.7 with it fully being allocated, and 23 at 13.2 million. This is assuming some growth in personal income. This is assuming that our refunds don't grow, meaning more and more people don't start asking for bigger refunds or start working remote more. I think the remote work is the biggest unknown at this point. We know that there's some organizations that may never come back or may stay hybrid. So we're hoping to have accommodated all of that in here. And I tend to be conservative, so I hope it does better than I am projecting here. So you can kind of see here the light green at the bottom is the administrative costs. The darker green is how much was sent to the general fund for the reduction in property taxes. And then the blue is the net new revenue, which is allocated 60-20-20. So next slide goes through the 60-20-20 split. At the end of fiscal year 22, we will have about 11.5 million to the pension plan from the income tax. In 23, we have 3.9 million budgeted. For public safety, 3.8 million has gone to support police and fire operations. That's in the general fund. Fiscal year 23 includes 1.3 million. And then the infrastructure and facility improvements are split between streets and then parks and facilities. So far supporting street improvements, we have about $2.3 million. And in fiscal year 23, another $768,000. Supporting parks and facility improvements, in fiscal year 22, a total of 1.5 million, and in 23, a little over 500,000. And when we talk about the CIP funds, we'll talk a little bit more about what those projects are. We also have a night that we talk about streets, so we'll have an opportunity to talk about what streets are scheduled or have been replaced. Any questions on income tax?
I'm squinting to see down there, but one thing that I would like to see is for people to be able to pay their income tax online, and I wonder if accelerating the plan to do that could reduce the overhead cost of administering it.
I'm not sure. We do have that on our list of things to look into, of accepting credit card payments for income tax. I almost said property tax. I think definitely something we want to look at, but we will need to think about how we handle credit card fees. Do we pass that along to the user, or does the city absorb that? So that's a conversation we would want to have with council. Credit card fees are a lot for the city to absorb. So if we decided to absorb that, it would probably actually increase our administrative costs.
Well, and simply being able to file the taxes online instead of a paper file, I imagine would be easier for everyone.
Hopefully, yes. We are working on it. Actually, this year we started where if you have your taxes prepared by a professional preparer, that can be filed electronically. We're hoping that our next step would be for anybody to file electronically. We just don't have the right platform yet to do that.
Thank you.
Yep. Other questions on income tax?
I know this isn't a simple answer, so if it's not relevant to this conversation, just tell me. But we are anticipating a drop in revenue due to people who have worked inside the city of East Lansing working remotely from outside the city of East Lansing. So an MSU TA who's suddenly doing all of their classes online, but they live on the east side of Lansing, right? But we should see a commensurate rise of people who live in the city of East Lansing who are now working remotely within the city of East Lansing. But we seem to have kind of just decided that that's going to be impossible to prove. I don't know.
Unless they are working for the city of Lansing, in the city of
Right.
Lansing. If it's in a place that's not an income tax, they're already paying 1%. So we wouldn't get a net, right? We don't get a net gain to that. And
Right.
because we're a destination employer, I think we tend to be
You're
hurt.
going to come up on the losing
We
side.
tend to come up on the losing side and not the winning side of that equation is what I think would happen. And that's what I think happened.
So we're just, that's good. Our net loss is really based on the idea that we have more people commuting into the city to work than we have living in the city who
That work
might work
elsewhere.
elsewhere. Okay.
And to be honest, it all depends on how people file their return. So
Right.
you don't have to allocate. There's a whole
Yeah.
there's a whole nother factor in there of how people choose to file their returns.
Right.
You can see if you go back to the table or the graph, Nicole, you can see in fiscal year 20, we were at 13.8 and then we dropped to 12.2. So we definitely saw a decrease.
And do you think, was that due to people filing returns for refunds?
Yes.
So we
In,
saw.
in fiscal year 20, now some of this could be because it was new in fiscal year 20,
They, like,
but in fiscal year 20,
overestimated.
we had like 2.5 million come in net with with returns.
Okay.
In the next tax year 20, we actually saw more money leave than come in with returns.
Okay.
Now,
Okay.
some of that, like I said, could be because it was the first year. Like, that's really what's
Right.
hard about trying to nail down what's happening, because
'Cause
our
we haven't
first
had any
year
baseline.
was the only non-pandemic year.
And it was the first year.
Yes.
Right. Okay. I got it. I just, I'm kind of thinking of, it's a uncomfortable situation for us, but like, for a city like Lansing or Grand Rapids that's been leaning on their income tax for a really long time, it could be pretty devastating.
Yeah, given they use it for operations, it probably
Yeah.
has a much bigger impact on
Yeah.
them than it has on us.
Like the city of Detroit, the city of Grand Rapids would be very impacted by it.
Right. Yeah. Grand Rapids is probably a destination employer as well, even with a higher population. Okay. That explains that. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Another thing to note is we are starting compliance, so we have been working on, first of all, withholders, which means employers. So employers in the city are required to withhold for their employees. So we're working on that compliance, and so far we've found a few and have gotten them to start withholding, so that's been a positive. And then we will start the process for individuals. So our third-party contractor will start running what they call the state tape. So they take the information from the state level, and then they say, did these people that live in this zip code on these streets, did they file a city return? And should they have, depending on what kind of income they have.
Sounds very cumbersome.
It's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Any other questions on income tax?
Just a comment. Just a comment. Go ahead and pass the fees along for the credit card use. Credit card, it's a privilege. There you go. Solved.
I like that. I like that response. That would be my recommendation for this purpose. I mean, we absorb the fees for a lot of things, but I do feel like for income tax, it would be a little bit different. What's that?
The question is whether it's legal or not under our ordinance.
I think with taxes, you typically would expect people to charge a user tax because cards, people get a 1% reduction, they get cash back. So the taxpayer could put all their money onto a card and then pay their taxes, get cash back, and then the city taxpayers are out the money essentially. So I do think that that's the primary way it's done with cities is they charge a convenience fee, which is equal to the cost of the typical service charge. But we can check into that to make sure.
Okay, my last section is kind of just other funds to highlight. I'm going to go through this real quick. There's just a couple I want to note. The library fund, you can see page 120 of your document. Their primary revenue source is property taxes. It's about 2.3 million. Reminder, 1 mil up for voter renewal in the fall. Both fiscal year 22 and 23 plan on using a large amount of fund balance, so we're expecting over the 2-year period to use about $950,000 of their $2.2 million fund balance. So as you know, there's some significant improvements underway. I believe they're just beginning the phase 2. So most of this work is going to be done in fiscal year 22, some of it going into fiscal year 23. So really that change in capital is why you're seeing a decrease in their overall budget. The Art Festival Fund looks like a significant decrease, but it's really because fiscal year 22 includes 2 festivals. So you probably recall with the pandemic that the 2021 festival was delayed until August. So we actually held 2 festivals in fiscal year 22, or will be holding 2 festivals. There's a chart on page 138 of the Art Festival that really breaks it down festival by festival, if that's helpful for you. And their fund balance is pretty healthy at about $28,000, which is 19% for their operating expenditures. For the computer fund, you're going to see that increasing about $279,000, which is about 14%. This is really due to the anticipated replacement of the phone system. There's also some refresh of employee computers that is scheduled. This is also limiting increases in the charges to the department, so we are using some fund balance in that fund. The DDA, page 214, we made some substantial efforts to assist the downtown businesses and revitalize the area. So we're continuing with Albert Al Fresco, art programs, business support programs, bike racks, beautification efforts, parklet programs, lots of things still planned. So you'll see that in their budget document, kind of lists out all the things that they've been doing. And then one thing I want to note here is the Evergreen Debt. This still remains a risk, so the DDA has the debt, but it is backed by the general fund, so the full faith and credit of the city. And the larger principal amounts do begin in fiscal year 24. So we will see a significant increase in those costs in fiscal year 24. So we'll have to be thinking about what we're going to do over the next year. And then the Downtown Management Board, new in fiscal year 23, is about $45,000 from the DDA, and this is for collaborative marketing and promotional activities. So I believe they're going to partner together and try to do more for the downtown and bring people in. So you'll see that increase, which is pretty substantial for the DMV. Their only other revenue is their special assessment. Next slide is the budget timeline. So this is kind of the laying out all the budget work sessions and what we have slated, I suppose, for those timeframes. Of course, council can decide to change it around, add things, remove things, whatever you desire. It also notes what will be done at regular council meetings. So tonight we have the setting of the public hearing, which will be on May 10th. And then we are required by charter to have this approved by May 24th. And that is all I have. Happy to answer any questions.
Should we jump over to?
So I think Chief Johnson is going to come up now and talk about the police department specifically.
Thank you.
Evening, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem Council. Glad to be here, and just going to talk a few minutes about the police budget, which most of our funds come out of the general fund. So that's is an important piece of the puzzle. We're going to talk about pages. We're going to touch base on page 36, 37, 38, 39 in the early on in the document that you have. And on page 36, we're just going to be, as you can see in the first half of that page, just going to talk about, you can see the revenue source and the expenditures, and of course, $11 million of our expenditures deals with personnel costs, and the operating costs is like $2.5 million. Out of the operating costs, I think Jill just alluded to, many of those costs we don't have control over from my standpoint. They are other funds, other costs that we have to absorb to operate our particular department. So we have maybe $400,000 possibly that we can deal with from a police chief standpoint. But Jill does a great job to keep me on track and making sure that I keep me in the guardrails and things of that nature. So that's what this first half of that page 36 is about. And we'll talk about the bottom half of 36 in a few minutes, but I do want to flip over to page 37 a little bit. And it talks about some of our programs and goals that we have, and that's how we actually do our work every year. We come up with our organizational chart every year. We design our chart depending on our goals and objectives for the year. And as you look on our goals and objectives, we're going to continue our community outreach programs, our initiatives. We are doing an excellent job with that. We're doing our sector meetings. We're doing our community meetings, our coffee with the chiefs, our events that we're setting up, things of that nature. We can, under our goals, you can also see our accreditation process. We can continue that. In that vein, we actually have allocated a lieutenant who is doing that full time, Captain Connolly, who is actually here tonight. He did the first year of the accreditation he had set up a group of committees to work on his accreditation process. And then we're into our second year of accreditation, trying to get it approved, and we allocated one lieutenant to deal with this process for the remainder of our accreditation phases this year. Our goal is to try and get it accomplished. We're going to have a mock assessment in the late summer, and then we hopefully get our assessment done in November, December. But it's a very important part of our goals for 2022. As you can see, as you're looking down at goals and objectives, we talked about we're going to continue our work with the Independent Police Oversight Commission. That's been a goal for council and for us also. We've allocated a lieutenant. Currently, he's basically we're using his time in a multitude of ways. About 50% of his time right now is being allocated towards the police commission. He's dealing with Director Hardy and Director Newman, who reference the needs of the commission, and hopefully we're trying to keep that line of information fairly seamless. And I think it's been a good relationship so far with all the parties involved. So Lieutenant Pride is doing an excellent job with that oversight commission, with our 2 directors who are staffing that commission. So that's going to continue to be one of our goals and objectives for the year. We're going to be, our neighborhood resource teams, we're going to be continue doing that also in 2022. It's a concept that I brought back when I came back in October of 20. And it's a concept that we try and problem solve. And so our goal is, this policing is a whole different beast right now. And so we have put all of our energies on problem-oriented policing and community-oriented policing. And these neighborhood resource teams, we meet every month. We split the city up in half. We have the east side and the west side, and all the departments are represented on this team. It's not a police thing, it's a city team. And so we have every department is represented on these teams, and we meet and we contribute. We have issues that come up, and a lot of it's police related, like traffic and things of that nature, or maybe have some blight in some of the neighborhoods and things like that. But these team members, they actually work together from different departments to try and come up with the best answer. And we've used those in the past, and I think they're extremely effective because sometimes us cops, we think the same way. And for us to get other people in the room talking about different things and how we can attack the same problem, but from a different angle, I think is extremely beneficial for us. So we can continue that concept moving forward. And one thing we're going to be doing, we're going to be creating a downtown business neighborhood. We're in the process of selecting someone to go into that role. We had one person in that role, but due to scheduling issues, she had to withdraw her interest in that particular position. We have another officer who has been assigned to our community engagement team, and he's actually on military leave. And so he's not due back until the fall, but he's going to come and help us with our downtown and making sure we're doing our community engagements for our downtown, establishing a neighborhood of that nature. You can read through that, the bottom part, reference our priorities is our training and our making sure we are dealing with our community, with our BIPOC communities, our students, our business owners, and things like that. And that's one of our goals, is always engage our community in every avenue that we're doing. And so that's going to be one of our main goals, and we'll talk a little bit about that a little bit later, dealing with our training and things of that nature. And there's a couple of different things that we are going to deal with. One of our goals is actually our wellness of our employees. We have 42 officers right now currently on the payroll. And you have authorized us to be at 49, and we are currently at 7 officers below our authorized strength, and we are making sure that our employees stay healthy, mentally and emotionally and things of that nature. So Captain Connolly is actually leading our charge dealing with our mentoring program, making sure we're taking care of one another. We have a peer support team that we're bringing up and running in 2022. We're looking for funds from the state and from the federal to help fund some of these initiatives. As Jill alluded to, there's money out there. We just got to try and we apply to all of it, but sometimes we don't get accepted in some of these grants. But that's the piece of the puzzle how we have to deal with. So we are working with that, and finally we also talking about the officers shortage. We are addressing the need of our police officers and trying to get people in the door. And we are addressing that in this budget, is asking for us to sponsor candidates through our police academy. And I'm asking for 6 positions to where we can put them in the police academy at our expense. And then at the end of the training, they come on board, they'll be our police officers, and work in our agencies. But right now, we don't have anyone on board. So our next academy is in August, which is in this budget year. So I'm asking for funding for 6 positions to go into that police academy. So it's very needed for us. We're behind with other agencies who are trying to get people in the door. It's a profession that people are not really gravitating towards right now. And we are trying to deal with those issues every single day. How we get people in the door, how we can keep the individuals. We have another sergeant who's leaving actually in August for another job. And so it's our responsibility to try and keep everyone employed and keep them healthy from that wellness standpoint, peer support, and that's extremely important for us. I think we've got this PBB model that is up here. We're going to talk a little bit. The second part of page 36 is I'm just going to touch base on some of these PBB pieces, and these big pieces are big pieces of what we asking for funding for. Our patrol operations, of course, on the left. Of course, these numbers are pretty much for our current budget that we're working off of. And so we have 6 sergeants, 1 lieutenant, and 24 officers assigned to the patrol operations with 5 vacancies in that group. And of course, in the patrol operations, we broke that down to obligated time and unobligated time. So the obligated time is when people call in for service, they call in for accidents, they call in for service, they call in for they got the car broken into, or a neighbor fight or something like that. When dispatch calls us, we are dealing with this patrol operations. And in 2021, we had 13,500 calls for service from dispatch. We also had another 10,000 calls for service when our officers called to dispatch and say, hey, dispatch, I'm out with a car who's broken down on Saginaw Street, or I'm out with an individual with open alcohol, or I'm downtown, I just stopped the fight. And anytime we are initiated a call, that is captured by our dispatch center, and we've had 10,000 of those in 2021. So overall, we have 23,000 types of calls, either dispatch or we initiating those calls, and that's in that patrol box there. Eats up a lot of our time. It's traditional policing. We answering calls for service. We're giving the best service we possibly can, and that's what our community is paying for. It's very important. On the community policing side, which is the big box right next to it, we are actually utilizing the same officers on the patrol in that community policing box, and that's the unobligated time. So when they're not on calls for an accident call or a larceny call or downtown or something like that, or they're not on a traffic stop or whatever else, we are asking them to do community policing initiatives. We're asking them to go into the neighborhoods. We're asking them to walk the streets. We're asking them to get on the bikes. We're asking them to engage the community in everything possible. And this is in a 12-hour day. So I am asking a lot from these officers. They're doing a great job. Excuse me. They're doing an excellent job with the work that we're asking them to do. It's really interesting because when I was here back in the 90s, we had 67 police officers. I had police officers dealing with patrol operations, and I had police officers dealing with community-oriented policing. 2 different groups, bunch of different officers. 67 doing that. Now I have 42 doing the same thing I'm asking them to do. So they're doing it. We're working them, and they don't have a lot of smiles on their face, but they are very supportive. They're very hardworking individuals, and I commend them for the work they're doing. So that's a little misleading with that box, but it's the same officers, but we're allocating different times. And they don't have a lot of time because when they're not doing police work, they're out in the community walking, doing business checks and things like that. So that's how those 2 boxes are pretty much set up. Our detective bureau, as you can see over on the right-hand side, we have 1 sergeant, 3 detectives, and 1 full-time clerical in that group. We have 1 police officer vacancy in that group also. So our detective bureau, of course, they deal with all of our follow-up investigations, the major crimes, the issues that we've had downtown, some of the shootings and some of the major crimes. These 3 or 4 detectives, they are working those cases, trying to follow up, dealing with witnesses. As Councilmember Watson says, we're from that interview room. That interview room, we use that interview room to interview people that we need to interview. And our technology is failing because we record the interviews with sound and video and things like that. And it's a great tool for us to do our work. So we've had that set up in a while. So some of our infrastructure is starting to break down a little bit. So that's the request we're asking for that. But those detectives will work that interview room quite often, working on the case that we have to work on. The custody unit, as you see, jail services down in the middle there. That deals with what we're dealing with in our custody unit. We have 3 full-time and 5 part-time jail service officers. We have 7 cells at the police department. We maintain a 72-hour temporary holding facility. Of course, we deal with the prisoners and things like that, safe, making sure they keep safe and things like that. We have a great crew in there. They're civilians. They're working really hard, and we, knocking on wood and things like that, we're very happy with we don't have injuries in there. We don't have deaths in our custody unit. They're doing an excellent job of work when they're dealing with our custody people who are in custody at the time. Our parking code enforcement, you can see at the bottom, it's dealing with the PACE. We have 1 sergeant over there in that group, 1 full-time and 6 part-time PACE officers. And these are the men and women who are in the white pickup trucks who are helping us for all different kind of things. They're writing parking citations, dealing with code enforcement, dealing with stuff around people's homes and things like that. And we try and maintain that. And it's a great service that we provide. And we're trying to keep that staffed also because it's a big rotation. We're stealing people from different departments to put them in police department, in police spots, and then we just got backfill all these other spots. But it's working for us a little bit, and so we're pretty excited about how they're doing in that group. Up at the top talks about police administration. Of course, that's where myself and the captain, and I'm short 1 person, a deputy chief. He left back last fall, take a chief's job at the airport. So he's the new director at the airport. So I'm down 1 spot, even in police administration. So Captain Connolly and I are actually, we split his work up, and so there's 2 of us doing 3 people's job up there. But I think I'm managing. The captain keeps looking at me saying, I'm not sure he's managing, because a lot more goes on his plate than on my plate. But he comes to work every day with a smile on his face, and I really do appreciate that. That number has gone up a little bit because I put 2 new lieutenants up in that administration, 1 lieutenant in charge of our accreditation piece, and 1 lieutenant who is not overseeing, but he's our staff liaison to the Oversight Commission. And he does, his category is professional standards. It's a group of 1, and that's him. But he's that lieutenant, so we had to reallocate his funds up into the police administration. And so those are some of the big parts. And then at the bottom, you can see police services right at the bottom. And that's our cadet program. And that's one of our main feeder pieces of the cadet. They're normally the college students who are working part-time. They work our front desk. They are a vital piece of our police department. We just talked to one today. They face our community every day. When they walk into the department, they unlock the doors, they deal with our employees. And the young employees, we try and keep them to move them up to either jail or into the parking or into police officers. We have a couple, 3 cadets who want to be police officers. So we're trying to get them interviewed to see if we get approval, we'll sponsor them in the academy in the fall and move them up the ranks too. So we're excited about the cadet program as well, which is a vital part of our group. And then on page 30, our last page basically deals with that page 39, just the department appropriations that I think Jill touched base on. We have some increases in the money that we're asking for in next year's budget due to our lower staffing levels and due to our high demand of our services. And so because we have high demand of services, we are putting people downtown for their fresco, overtimes, our football, a lot of different overtimes. Not thank goodness, but Michigan State basketball did not go through Final Four, and that eats up so much of our overtime funds. So that was in 22, but we'll see what 23 has in store for us. So our lack of our bodies, our limited amount of people have increased our numbers a little bit, reference overtime use and things like that. I think Jill mentioned reference the MERS costs also, reference some of that stuff has gone up with the increase. We're not asking for more stuff, but the price is just the cost of doing business in the police field. In the middle of that page talks about the fund. I'm requesting from the police sponsorship, the $54,000. And that's just tuition and supplies for 6 people to go to our police academy starting in August. Hopefully we can find some savings in our regular budget. We have to pay them full-time wages and put them on benefit package possibly that's how when they go through recruit school. And that's the request that I'm asking for from that standpoint. And then at the bottom of that, we talked about how we still, our technology, we're asking for a couple of things with our Just FOIA. With this piece of software that we're asking for some help with our FOIA request. We had 1,200 FOIAs just in the police department in 21. In 2020, we got beat up with FOIAs because that was when the time with the police reforms and everything was asking for a lot of different things. We had like 1,800 FOIA requests in 2020. We had 1,221. And so this Just FOIA software that I'm asking for, it will help not necessarily eliminate work, it's just going to help streamline it so we can get our FOIAs out in a little more timely fashion instead of asking for all these extensions that we have to now because of our limited resources. And as you see at the bottom, we are still we're still working with the CNA Corporation Group. It's a contract that we signed in this budget year, but they can continue on. Our report is they give us quarterly updates, and our final report is due in the fall, which is in the 23 budget year. Reference how we're doing fair and impartial policing. They're looking at our training, they're looking at our policy procedures, and looking at our fair and impartial policing initiatives when we're out in the streets and things like that. So they're looking at 3 different prongs of things we asked them for, and so far the reports have been favorable, and we've been very happy with the report that we're getting so far. Reference their objectivity and how they're gathering their statisticians are really good about what they're trying to put together and things like that. So we're looking forward to that final report, and that's it in a nutshell. I know I had to talk fast, but I'm here for questions and answers, and that's what I have right now.
First question is, am I able to pull that up? Is that in our?
This is the PPV public portal. So
Yep.
what you have to do is, there's lists of programs, but there's also,
I added a link to the AIR, to the agenda item report.
Okay.
So
Oh.
I added a link to the portal.
but it's also the public portal, and you go under tree plot diagram to get to this, and we have this for all departments. I think it's a great tool
Yes.
because it shows
Yeah.
the relative expense and how much resources you're putting in each program, so you can tell each department kind of what you're
Yeah.
getting for the dollars, so.
Yeah, I think, I remember it last year, and I think it's very helpful, but for me to follow along, did you say you added it to the agenda? Like,
It's in the agenda item report, so if you click in to actually look at the very front page, there should be a clickable link on there. Maybe in like the second paragraph.
okay, yeah, I see it. Okay.
Hopefully it works,
Yep.
I'm not sure.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Chief, I recently read about Bath Township. I think they're offering like money up front for people to join their force. And did you read about that?
No,
Am I right?
no, it's always on the table. A lot of departments are doing that.
Yeah, and
Yes.
so I'm curious about comparables, like what are our other groups around us doing? MSU, how much do they offer? So we can see how competitive we are not, and same with like Bath and,
We can get
Meridian and stuff.
a comparable to you by next week.
Okay.
It's an employees market right now in police work, and they are really looking to see where they want to work.
Yeah.
And so people are offering different things. Yeah.
Is this the only time you're with us?
Officially,
Okay.
but I'll be in the back of the room most of these times unless you call me up to the podium.
I see. Last year, there was a breakdown of the police budget, and can we get that again? And I can go back in my notes to be more specific.
Yeah, so what you asked for last time was a line item budget, so
Yeah.
we can provide you a line item budget.
Can I ask you, so I know that this, the system of sponsoring recruits is not new to us. Do we have a good retention rate with the candidates coming out of that program?
We do. Captain County may have more about that, but we have
The employees-driven market makes me a little bit nervous. I
Yes.
totally think it's a great strategy. I just don't want to invest in training an
Right.
officer that's going to
Yeah,
immediately leave for another apartment.
I totally agree. We have 3 officers right now who are currently, and they're doing a great job for us. We sponsor them through it, and they were sponsored before I got here. They're doing a great job for us. And we are also, if we get approved, we're actually building in, the captain's working on a document that we're building in to hold them accountable for the times they're with us. So if we pay $9,000 for their tuition fees, we pay $9,000 for their tuition fees. But if they decide to leave after a year, then we'll recoup some of that money back from them if they decide to leave and things like that. So we're building in a document. We're going to have our new law firm look at that document and see how, make sure it holds ground and things like that. But we feel the same way, because we train them and they leave 6 months later. Like, that's not going to help us.
Right.
But we're working on that. We're
So,
addressing that.
I mean, the $9,000 is not my concern. I'd much rather have an enthusiastic, community-minded young
Yep.
police officer. But I do know that it's very easy for them to move to other departments right now, which I also want to take a second to say to the officers that have stayed with us, thank you so much for believing in us. I know it's not an easy community to police. And we do definitely have a core group that seems dedicated to staying, and I really appreciate them. So let's get you some cadets and add some more to that cohort.
One thing I want to mention about that as well, Mayor Pro Tem, is that, the signing bonus is a good approach we may want to consider as well. But I think if we're having people sort of homegrown in the department, they are a part of the organization, they're a part of the culture, they want to be an officer in East Lansing once they see the operation. And I think that is hopefully a more predictable way to spend the money to have them come up and sponsor them that way, because then they already know the organization, they want to be here. And it seems to be a reliable way for us. But not saying that the other way couldn't work, but it seems to be a way that they already know the culture and the people, and they've chosen here. So,
On that same note, what the city manager was mentioning, these individuals that we're looking at like 9 right now for this next police academy, and so half of those 9 actually have worked up, like the city manager mentioned, have worked up the ranks and worked in different parts of our department in their interest in being a police officer, which is a wonderful thing, because since they've been here, we have gone from traditional policing to community and problem-oriented policing. And they're seeing what I'm driving and what we're driving at the department. For them to want to be a part of that, instead of going somewhere else, it's a great day for me, because it's less headaches for me to try and convince them to do the work, because they already know what's going on. They know what's happening, and they want to stay. And so we're pretty excited about that piece, moving that, going from a traditional to community-based policing, and that's exciting from the captain of my standpoint.
One more question before we lose you, or I guess before other council members grab the microphone. We have how many neighborhood resource officers right now on our team?
We have 1 full-time and 2 part-time.
Has there been any talk about expanding that program? Because I hear nothing but great things from the community about every time they interact with those.
And every time I talk to them all the time. And I said, do you need more people? I said, I probably can get more people. They said, actually, Chief, we're good right now. We're okay right now. So that's exciting to hear.
Yeah.
And same to our social workers. I ask them all the time, are we good? How's your work level and things like that? And they said, we're good right now. We did lose one. She put her letter in. She had some personal family issues that she was unable to stay with us, so we're going to have to post for a full-time social worker now. But we're working with campus, and we're coming with a couple of different things. We're asking for more money. A grant's due next week. We're asking for trying to work with campus to help with our social work, so maybe we could have a combined team, because Lansing got one on a grant a couple months ago. So we're going to try and get that same grant now.
Perfect.
With us in campus.
Just copy their homework. It worked for
that's
them.
That's exactly what we're going to do. But we asked them, and they said they're good right now. I didn't ask the police officers, because I know what they're going to say. They need more bodies, Yeah. But the NRS, they're doing a great job for us. And with that full-time spot on the day shift, she's done a really good job. Because
That's Tanya Williams?
Yes.
Yeah, every time somebody talks to her, I get a glowing email telling me that she's fabulous.
She is. She really is.
Thanks, Tanya. Well, we don't want people sitting around doing nothing, so that's good. I'm glad that, we don't need more. We don't need extra, but I'm glad that they're being used and that they're not feeling overtaxed.
Yeah.
I forgot how much I don't like the Roman numerals, and I would like to know who knows the Roman numeral pages. But I'm just wondering if next time when we get the budget package, can it be lettered? Does anyone, who does the Roman numerals?
We can fix, I think it is, when you get to like LV, you get to 50
Yes.
and 60, it starts to
And
get
then
a little
I'm going
distracting.
backwards or forwards, and
It kind
that's
of,
kind of hard.
we can fix that and go to A and B and
Right, me too. I'm up to 12.
these finance folks,
Bunch of nerds over here.
Yeah, they like the Roman numerals. We can fix that.
the translator then, Babcock. We'll have you shut it out.
That we'll plug it into, yeah. All right, anyway.
So, one of my focuses about wanting the line item on the police budget also has to do with, again, that huge percentage that goes towards public safety. And so can I see like a further breakdown within the public safety, what percentage is police or what percentage is fire, or how does that go? And that's also just why I zero in on that. And I'm wanting to see that line item every single budget year, and not upon request like each year, but every single time. And part of it also has to do with sometimes we see that we easily dedicate dollars to certain things and not to other things. And so I just think it's, again, really important, especially if we choose to dedicate so much money to public safety, that we see that breakdown more deeply of where that money is going.
So a couple things, we're happy to give you the breakout of the public safety, but public safety is made up of police, fire, and it also includes building and housing departments, because those are considered, a safety concern or a safety program. When we give you the line item, I just want to be clear, are you only asking for police line item, or do you want all public safety?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And yes, we can provide the breakout, police, fire, and the other public safety programs.
Thanks. I did want to say one more thing, sorry. I think it's cool that you all are going out into the community. And I did mark my calendar for that June date. It's on a Sunday, so hopefully I think I'll be able to pull it off. And I also, if you're not doing it, or if you haven't thought about it, just want to encourage again to also meet the people where they're at. Like I've talked before about, going to football warm-ups and throwing a football around with some of these young men, or going into some of the Greater Lansing Islamic Center, going to where people are also would be cool. But I appreciate what you all are doing, and like I said, I hope to make it out in June, so thank you. Thank you all.
Councilperson Brookover?
Yeah, I have, and Chief, I don't actually know if, this might be directed to the three of you and Ms. Felposh and the city manager. And this is available online, correct, this document?
Yeah, it's on, correct, it's on.
Yeah, so I mean, if you look at page, well, now Watson's got me mixed up, but if you look at the chart that I think you showed earlier, it shows that at least for 2023, the total public safety request is 21.7% of the budget, which is $27,477,700, which gets me then to the questions about police operations, which end up looking like the request is 13 million. So that's about half of the total public safety request. So, Chief, I know you've explained this to me, and I just want to verify a couple things. And actually, Ms. Felposh, my question globally to you is first. So when we see personnel costs in any department or on the entire, does that include Social Security withholding?
Yes, it includes all wages and all benefit costs.
Okay, and the city has to, for itself, has to pay, what's the percentage of the salary?
It's 7.65 is FICA, so part of it's Social Security and part of it's Medicare.
Okay, so we pay that, the employee doesn't pay that.
We both pay it, so the employee pays it and the city pays it.
You split it, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so
No. You each pay 7.65, looking at my payroll people.
that's what happens in my office. That's why I was wondering. Maybe you guys figured something else I didn't figure out. Anyway, so now with the police budget, when you say personnel services, do we pay Social Security for the police?
Neither pays Social Security.
Okay, and that's because statutorily, the police don't get Social Security. Is that correct?
Correct. It has to do with the fact that they have a defined benefit plan.
Okay, so when we look at page 36 in real numbers, and we look at personnel services, that personnel services does not include Social Security or withholding.
Correct.
It would for civilian employees. The
I'm
sworn
sorry,
officers,
I
yeah, the sworn
understand.
officers would,
For
yes.
uniform employees, it doesn't include that.
Correct.
And is that also true for fire?
Correct.
Okay. But speaking generally, all other categories of city employees, we're paying FICA and we're paying withholding on, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So now, Chief, this gets to something you and I have talked about before. So the personnel services category, and again, I don't know which of the three of you can answer this, but we do have pension provisions for police and fire. And are those pension contributions reflected in personnel services?
Yes, all the pension costs are in personnel services as well.
So when I look at real page 36, when I see personnel services, that includes the pension payments we're required to make under our existing collective bargaining agreements, correct?
It does, and it also includes the supplemental.
Okay, that we bargained for.
The supplemental is the general fund portion, so in fiscal year '23, we have budgeted 1.1 million, and that is partially in the fire department personnel services and partially in the police personnel services because we allocate it to their divisions.
Okay. But when we look at personnel services costs in other departments, are we also looking at the pension being included in there? A different pension, I understand
It
that.
includes their retirement costs,
Their
yes.
retirement costs? Okay, all right. Thank you, appreciate it. Good move, Chief, sitting next to her. I didn't, you know. I always knew you were brilliant, but I,
Councilperson Babcock?
Not at this time, thanks. Thank you.
Should we switch to Chief Carson, or do we want to stay with Chief Johnson?
I'm ready if there's no more questions.
And we can have Chief Johnson will be here for the 5 weeks if we need him, so it's not like he's disappearing from us. So if there's more questions, we'll get answers.
We're not done with you yet. We'll get you. Next.
Good evening, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, and council members. I would like to briefly discuss with you the fire department. I utilized the plot, but I am going to kind of blend a few of the programs together. The fire department consists of 54 personnel. 48 of them are in suppression, 6 administrative. That includes myself, a safety training officer, a fire marshal, and 2 fire inspectors and 1 administrative assistant. As of Monday, we will have a new administrative assistant, and looking forward to working with her. Our fiscal year 2023 budget will include $11.9 million budget. Within that, the personnel costs alone are $10 million. My pages are included on 40 through 43 if you need a reference. Revenues for the fire department include $5.8 million. Within that, $3.28 million come from Public Act 289 fire protection, $63,000 from a SAFER grant, that is staffing for adequate fire and emergency responders. That will conclude at the end of this year. We have had 3 individuals on that. We have received $530,000 for COVID-related grants and $1.3 million in ambulance charges. This was a budgeted increase of $350,000 from fiscal year 2022. The programs I will touch on 5 of the larger programs. The first one is EMS and transport. Within our department, we have 48 firefighter paramedics within the department. To clarify, a paramedic is the highest level of an EMS provider, and we have refused to go below that because we want to provide the highest standard of care to the people within the city of East Lansing. Last year, we responded to 4,445 EMS calls, and that was an increase of about 26% from the previous year. 1,000 of those were what we consider priority calls. So within that, you have 2 paramedics going in the ambulance. We also have a fire truck responding with 3 additional personnel, all paramedics. This allows for a quick, efficient care of a patient, quicker packaging of our patient, and allows extra personnel to ride into the hospital if needed to provide that extended care. This year, you provided a striker contract that will provide enhanced care and injury prevention. With that contract came auto loads, so there will be no more lifting of patients in and out of an ambulance. For every patient that we transport, we lift that cot with or without a patient 4 times. So take that and multiply it times 4,445 times. There's a very high risk of back injuries with lifting patients. Our society is not getting lighter, but getting heavier. And with this auto loads, it's going to be a significant prevention for us. With that, we also got monitors which will assist in diagnostic readings for the hospital. All the features that these monitors provide will only enhance the ability for that patient care to be provided quicker at the hospital and allow us to give that information over the radio, so they are going to be much more prepared with what we are bringing into them. Within our department, we have several EMS instructors, so we provide for instructors to get trained so they can teach us within the department. We have several continuing education platforms that we have to deal with: advanced cardiac life support, pediatric life support, basic life support, along with our regular continuing education credits. We have had 2 fire cadets this year, and both of them were paramedics. That's kind of the platform I want to stay on because we don't want to go below that level. These 2 paramedics went on and got their firefighter degree. It's through the area fire chiefs. This one is going to be hired this week. So we took one of our cadets that we supported, and they are hired on. Our second one will be hired on in June, as we have a person retiring. We would like to continue with our cadet program for hiring and retention reasons. Paramedics are not coming out of the woodwork wanting to work places. We're having the same kind of issues the police are, but this kind of gives us an opportunity to look at that individual, let them get comfortable with our department, and it kind of proves what kind of individual they're going to be and if this is somebody that we want to keep on. Within our EMS, we have 2 tactical paramedics who work with the East Lansing Police Department. They can be called in at any time when they go on raids. You have a variegated gunman, anything with violence. We have 2 EMS personnel that deal with that. And we have a response time that we are trying to measure ourselves up to. They have a response time of 60 seconds. That's from the tone drop to the time we get them in the rig and on the road to the call. We are meeting that at about 90%, and I kind of vetted it. I eliminated our training time because if we have people in turnout gear, up on a ladder, or in the middle of an evolution, there's no way we're going to meet those times. And same way with delays, if we are pulling people out of bed, the travel time between getting dressed, ready, and to the ambulance. However, in our working times, wide awake, we are meeting that 60-second, but we're always looking to improve on that, getting en route to a call. When it comes to our fire suppression calls, we responded to 1,332 calls. In addition, they also responded to 1,000 EMS calls. So we are staying pretty busy. That was a 47% increase from last year. Every year sequentially, we have gone up. We are maintaining approximately 16 people per shift. We addressed 61 structure fires, 205 car or dumpster fires, 830 fire alarms, 94 smoke investigations. And I've provided some breakdowns just for your general interest of all the different kinds of runs we have done. We continually do training in-house, whether it's from driving the apparatus, pumping, laying hose, strategies and tactics, SCBA competencies, so that's the face mask and air packs that we wear, aerial work, and patient rescue. Our response time for fire structures is met at a 2-minute mark. So that is people getting to the rigs fully dressed and inside, buckled in, and we are meeting that at approximately 90%. Again, I eliminated the times that we're training and sleeping because that's going to cause an increased delay, but we're always looking to get our people to the rigs quicker. We do wear quite a few hats within the fire department. So within the metro area, our metro departments, Delta, Delhi, Lansing Township, Lansing, we do quarterly trainings. We do structural collapse, trench rescue, high angle rescue, confined space, and hazmat. So these are specialty things that we do that we continually train on. They're things that fortunately they do not happen very often, but then require us to train even harder to maintain our proficiency. Within these disciplines, we continually train and have instructors. We try to get a person through every couple years, so we have that legacy of people that are able to continue to train us. Other trainings that we provide: ice water rescue, extrication, and hazmat. And if you're probably well aware, just last week we had to go help Meridian. They had an individual fall in the lake. They were kayaking and unfortunately had one poor outcome with that. We do have a boat. We train with it in the river. So we do have people that are pretty proficient in that. We've entered into a contract this year with Msu Environmental Health Services for our hazmat services. So we are providing the hazmat truck, which we had already had, and they are providing the soft goods and helping with the monitors. That's a big win for us because the soft goods is usually which carries the high-end cost for things. So that was a good service contract that we entered into this year. Our Fire Prevention Bureau currently contains 1 fire marshal and 2 fire inspectors. Now this year, because of the number of building constructions have come down and some constraints, we are gonna, through attrition, we're gonna lose 1 of our fire inspectors. Our fire marshal is currently ready for retirement and just looking for a second job, so we'll have a fire marshal and fire inspector, but we should be able to spread out the work with those 2 people. This year, they were able to conduct 190 inspections, 209 fire and life safety inspections, 164 re-inspections for code compliance, 67 plan reviews, so that's our new construction. We are working towards moving towards electronic plans and documentations, one easier to share with our other departments, and reduce the paper that we are trying to figure out where to store under HANA right now. We're working on your class 5 and 6 occupancies because now they're required to have evacuation plans. So Fire Inspector Newman has devised an electronic portal that we're able to give to these entities, and electronically they should be able to put that information in. It's easier for the monitor, much easier to update. We are continuing to work with our educating our fraternities and sororities on fire safety, what not to do to smoke alarms, how to keep them from going off, working with the high school and through the kindergartens, and we're going to try to work more with our seniors and youth in fire safety prevention. We're updating our Knox box, which are boxes you might see on the walls of some places that have a set of keys in there, which is less damage to you. We have a universal key. The only ones that have the key to it gives us access into the building, less damage in trying to break in, and quicker for us to evaluate what's going on. One of our goals is to enhance community outreach through fire safety education. Our last program that I would like to speak of is our Msu Special Event. So when I speak of special events, these are activities that we do above and beyond what's on our duty time. We have covered 80 events, which includes men and women basketball, football, hockey, gymnastics, graduation, and cheer competitions. And now we're starting to take on a few MSU events at the Pavilion, which are not MSU directly, but club-type events. We are exceeding our expectations from fiscal year 22 and only expect to get a little bit busier. And that is what I have. I have provided a report from our fire prevention and our EMS call list for your review. And I am welcome to answer any questions you might have.
Councilperson Watson? I went down the line already.
The continuing education training, is that all of, that includes, you know, all the workers, the 52 people?
Yes.
Okay. And Chief, will you have something like that for us too? The number of hours? Okay. I'm curious, when you mentioned you all talk to the fraternities and the sororities, is that frequently or?
They try to hit every single one every year, educating on how to exit, what not to do, fire prevention type things. Really high on the multi-unit housing, where there's a large volume of people, high risk, that type of thing.
Do you all talk about naloxone?
I'm sorry?
No, when people OD. The
Narcan?
Yeah, Narcan, thank you.
I don't know if that's brought up as much in there. That to me is more maybe a police type thing, because I do believe you guys carry Narcan in the rigs too. I mean, we obviously do, but sometimes they get to that before. I haven't seen a really high rate of that in East Lansing, and maybe Chief might be more aware of it, but not compared to some other communities, I would say.
Okay.
No, we do. We use it fairly often, and so it's a great tool for us to have, because sometimes we are the first ones there. So and we use it. So and we train on it. But we don't do a lot of community education on it ourselves. We have it ourselves, but we don't do too much community education as right now.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you know, during the day I work in public health, and so you all are typically the first people on the scene then during an overdose. And does it happen more frequently at the fraternities and sororities?
I don't see that. No,
Okay,
it's
just kind of, yeah.
kind
all over the place.
of kind of random.
Yeah.
We had one of the ones I know of who was in an apartment building actually right here at Abbott and Bircham, which is an apartment complex. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
And my last, just kind of training thing again, and just always looking for opportunities to slip in and educate the community more. You mentioned going into the schools, and so I was curious about like car seat safety. Sometimes we call, certain groups of children our lost kids because they're not in the booster seats and they're not fully seat belted. But is that something you all talk about too, or?
We take care of that also.
Good.
So we have two trainers who get those how to install those, and one actually has left. So we have one. We're going to train another person how to get that. And so it's one of these ideas that we may have like a community event in the future when we get that second person on, where people can drive through maybe Patriarch Park or something, and they can get their car seats checked and things like that. So that's on the burner, but I think we do more of that than the fire. So
Thank you. And just throwing it out there, sometimes I've talked about like elementary school pickups, peeking into parents' cars or whoever's picking up the child, and also just those opportunities to say, hey, did you know, your kid should still be in the booster seat, or your kid should, this or that. But thank you.
that's a good point. Thank you.
Just make sure that's legal.
Yes.
I call that a search.
It's a
I don't know what the judge would say, but that's what I'd say.
Councilperson Babcock?
Question, why the increasing number of fires?
I wouldn't say there's an increased number of structure fires, but in fires in general, if you talk about the dumpsters, the couches, that is a trend, especially during football season, that people just light things up. It is something we discussed. It's unfortunate, but that is, it's a tradition. It almost feels like it's not a positive one, but it seems to happen quite a bit.
Did I actually hear, and I could have heard it wrong, 47%?
Oh, overall, I think was our responses. So fire
Okay.
responses in general. So I gave you a
Okay.
breakdown of everything.
Yes.
So we had a 47% increase relative to the last year, but it was a slower year. But every
Correct.
year we've picked up more and more. But that includes all your smoke alarms,
Right.
everything that's included in there.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
This, again, probably isn't the right forum for this, but I think you probably know that I rode along during the Michigan State game, and so I observed the difficulties that you guys had getting to those structural fires, or not the structural fires, the upholstery fires, shall we say. And it just, it struck me, we had one rig that got, mobbed by the crowd, and then just in general, the traffic on the streets was so heavy. And I was wondering if there was a different way for us to do response to those small fires. I know we still have to do full safety gear, but to get the rigs in there is just so large when everything is so crowded. And I figure you guys have probably already thought about this because obviously you have a much more intimate knowledge of the difficulties there than I do, and I just wonder if there's a different way for us to respond to that, and if there's some, equipment or something that would make that more possible. Obviously, the goal is to get them to quit it. So, I'm not saying we should validate the behavior by altering our response, but if it's something that we know is going to happen, is there a way for us to make it safer, I guess?
Let it burn out by itself. And when it gets really busy and we are just going from one to another, the police are really good about saying, this is how big, this is how bad, or this is how close it is to things. Safety's first. I'm not going to run people over to get to something that'll burn out by itself. One thing that we did learn from the U of M weekend is we will start staffing up one extra person as a safety person. I mean, we had people on top of pieces of apparatus, and if we were to start to move unknowingly, that's a big risk and liability.
So an additional crew person to kind of watch the
It will
rig.
be kind of a babysitter, somebody to walk 360 around it, because we will leave our rig and walk to what we can get to, but we need to have some safety written into that, and we've never experienced it to the degree that we did this past year.
Hopefully we never will again.
But we have
Let's
to be
call that a
prepared for
one-off.
it, and
Yeah.
we will be ahead of the game should that come to be, and we'll keep people off the rigs and out of trouble.
Chief, did you want to talk about the new capability with the smaller truck that?
We
and how
have
that's worked out for us?
a squad, and we had a couple years, and unfortunately with COVID, our numbers got we limited our people. So we do have a small pumper. It's a rescue. Emergency 51 would be the closest thing I think that would be relevant to it. That is something when we have the staffing we'll put in. It's smaller, it's more maneuverable, it gets to what we got to get to. It would be really good for the couches, the dumpsters, trash can fires, and we also use it as our backup rig when we chase that ambulance for an extra set of hands. Quicker response, less wear and tear on the larger vehicles. When staffing allows, certainly we will be putting that into service.
Awesome, thank you, I appreciate it.
Further questions?
Thank you.
Thank you.
So that is the conclusion of our presentation. Obviously, we're continuing next week, continuing on with the general fund. So at this point, unless council has questions, we're ready to council to take the next item of public comment, and we'll carry on next week. And of course, we can accept questions during the week. If you're reviewing the budget and you have written questions, please send them to me and my assistant. We'll get them to finance, and then we'll get written answers to everybody by next week. Thank you. And thanks for the presentations.
For communication from the audience? All right. None seen.
Do we have an online component to communication today? No. No, okay.
No one in the online queue for this session?
Is not
Yeah.
live streamed. We are not able to accommodate online callers right now.
Okay. All right. All right. This meeting then is, were you stepping up?
We do have a public comment.
General council meeting.
Oh,
Oh,
perfect.
okay.
Well, then we'll see you in 10 minutes.
See you in a few minutes. All right. Meeting adjourned.